Chapter 56. Considering his job offer. In whispering way, inside Elizabeth's small eatery, the middle-aged woman was seen clearing up the used plates of her customers. She walked inside the kitchen and put the plates away in the sink before using her apron to wipe off the beads of sweat on her forehead. She was used to having to do all the work in the eatery by herself without any help, but today was different. Because of the new building being constructed in whispering way, the workers were coming to eat at her eatery. Elizabeth hadn't gotten a single moment of rest throughout today. But then she wasn't complaining because she was in desperate need of money to pay back the bank loan. She didn't want her daughter to bear the burden of paying for something she had acquired herself. It may seem selfish to admit, but she was relieved that Mia hadn't found a job. It would only create more stress for her to juggle between school and work. Elizabeth was willing to exhaust herself with work to shoulder all the responsibilities because it was the right thing to do. No matter what, she had already sworn to protect Mia from her monstrous father and give her a better life that has nothing to do with her past, just like she had promised a certain someone that she would never allow Mia to know the truth of her father and what happened that night. Kelvin Rodrigo, Elizabeth thought with a fearful, reminiscing expression, was hers and Mia's worst nightmare. He was a selfish bastard with no human feeling. Mia's mother had regretted marrying him the moment he raised his hand to hit her immediately after their wedding ceremony was over, because she had gone to the restroom and missed his business partner whom he wanted her to meet. Kelvin was a short-tempered maniac. And if there was anything Elizabeth was grateful about now, it was the fact that Mia had no recollection of him and what he had made her do at a very young age. Elizabeth had changed hers and Mia's identities just to get away from that evil man. He was a crazy man with a crooked mindset. It was good that he had no idea Mia survived the incident 15 years ago, or else, he wouldn't rest until he saw to it that he found her and finished his unfinished business from years ago. Elizabeth was willing to live this poor life and continue to work hard until she made Mia's life better and gave her everything she deserved in life. As long as Mia would never find out about what went wrong in the past, Elizabeth was content with it. Elizabeth was lost in her thoughts when Owen's voice snapped her out of it. He greeted her with a smile as he walked into the kitchen, saying, "Good afternoon, Aunt Elizabeth." It had become a habit for him to come to the eatery before going home after school, and Elizabeth was used to the routine and would always look forward to his and Mia's return from school. Turning around, Elizabeth smiled back at Owen and asked warmly, "Afternoon, Owen. How's school?" She knew he must be starving, so she walked towards the pot of hot food to serve him. Even though they were just neighbors in the apartment building, she had taken Owen like family after learning that he had lost his mother at a young age and his father was absent in his life as he spent his days drinking without concern for his son's well-being. And one thing Elizabeth couldn't stand was seeing a neglected child. Owen sat on the table in the kitchen as he replied to her inquiry about his school. "It's stressful as always since I'm in my final years at the university," he replied fondly as he put his bag down, but then something crossed his mind and he looked up at the older woman. "Where is Mia?" he asked while looking around. She normally got home before him, and he'd usually come here to meet her helping her mother before dinner. "Mia isn't back yet. You know how she is sometimes, she doesn't come home early," Elizabeth remarked as she walked back to hand Owen the food. He took the tray from her while muttering a, "Thank you, ma'am." He then said, "I was hoping she would have been back home considering how the weather looks like it's going to rain anytime soon." You know how Mia is with rain. Elizabeth froze in place upon noticing it indeed looked like it was going to rain anytime soon. This wasn't good at all. Mia wasn't fond of rain after what happened to her years ago in her childhood. Rain and thunder traumatized her to the extent she wouldn't want to be alone or outside in the rain. Elizabeth paled at the thought that Mia wasn't rushing home today even though the weather looked like this. Normally she would have found her way home at the slight signs of rain. "Let me call her and see why she isn't home yet." Elizabeth rushed to get her phone and dialed her daughter's number. The phone rang repeatedly, but she didn't pick up. Where was she not to notice it was going to rain? "What?" Mia exclaimed in astonishment after Neil told her the job he had for her. She might have been desperate to find a part-time job, but what he was offering was completely out of the picture. "You heard me, Harrison. I will pay you enough to come and cook and clean my condo 3 days a week," Neil remarked nonchalantly as he walked out of his closet holding a shirt and his short trousers for the girl to wear, as her clothes were already ruined and he knew she'd need something to wear. Because seeing her in that towel, where her smooth legs and collarbone were exposed, wasn't doing him any good. He didn't want to admire anything about her body, but his eyes kept swaying to her against his will. About the job thing, he had thought about it when she first stepped into his condo. Even though he didn't know this older version of Mimi, he had figured out that she would never take money from him willingly to pay back the loan Liam had reported to him about. He didn't want to interfere in her life, but then since she needed a job and he also needed someone that would temporarily clean his house without him getting annoyed by their presence in his space, then why not offer her to do it, then pay her what she needed? He didn't lack money in life. He had enough of it to waste on rebuying furniture when they got dusty instead of getting someone to clean them. Furthermore, he needed to keep the girl close until he got all the information about the story she found on the Da Kroll organization. He had been commanded by his uncle to get the girl to take him to the place she first saw the men and also get her to describe all the faces she could remember so a drawing of them would be made. He wouldn't want her suspecting his intentions of asking questions, so he would have to do it one at a time. Not to mention her nosy journalist instincts that he'd noticed. He wouldn't want her knowing his identity and then publishing it to the world and ruining everything for him. Neil thought as he handed her the clothes. "Wear them," he said calmly, and when she took the clothes from him, he sat down on the edge of his bed, waiting to hear her answer on the job offer. If she didn't want it, he wasn't going to force it on her. He wasn't the one in need of a job. Mia, who absent-mindedly took the gray t-shirt and shorts from him, looked down at the clothes as she silently thought about his offer. She had been looking for a part-time job for days now, and now that she had gotten one, that wasn't something she would have considered before. She was hesitant. She could cook and clean, but having to do so for someone with a short temper like Mr. Bennett was something to think twice about. He had told her to pick a time and days that would be convenient for her study, and he had also said that she wouldn't be working for him for long because he would be leaving the city after their main professor, who used to teach them investigative journalism before he took his place as a substitute, returned. Remembering how she would be needing the money to support her mother, Mia decided to take the job offer. After all, at this point, she wasn't yet sure if she would still be a student in Ivy Grove Institution by tomorrow if Diane requested her father to withdraw her scholarship. "I will take the job," Mia murmured softly while subconsciously hugging the clothes he gave her against her chest. "Good. Now dress up so I can drop you off," he said while standing up from the bed and regarding her with his stone-cold gray eyes. If he was pleased by her decision, he didn't show it in his expression and continued to stare at her as if waiting for her to dress up so he could get her out of his space. Mia frowned upon realizing that he had no intention of granting her privacy to dress. "Are you planning to stand there and watch me or?" she questioned, her voice trailing off as she glanced at the weather outside through the glass walls of his bedroom. The sky had darkened, and an ominous gloom hung in the air, suggesting an upcoming rain. Her eyes widened. She needed to return home before the rain began. However, as soon as those words entered her mind, a bolt of lightning streaked across the sky, accompanied by a deafening thunderclap, causing her face to drain of color. Chapter 57. Being forced to lay on the bed with her. Neil observed Mia's blank stare at the glass wall as the raindrops began to tap against it. She looked frozen in place, and her fingers were holding on to the clothes he gave her so tightly they were trembling. Her face had drained of any color. The ominous atmosphere outside matched the tension within his room as he continued to watch her expression, wondering what was wrong with her. As Neil was about to ask if she was all right, lightning streaked across the sky, and thunder roared, making her scream. Her body began to tremble, and the clothes fell away from her hands. When the rain intensified, she crouched down on the floor and pressed her hands against her ears, desperately beginning to call for her mother. "Mom, it's raining. Take me away from him. Take me away," she was muttering with her body trembling. Neil, surprised by her reaction, approached cautiously, trying to comprehend the sudden fear gripping her. He crouched down before her. "Hey, what's wrong with you?" he asked with a deep frown. He had never seen a grown woman get terrified of rain. And if he remembered clearly, she used to like rain as a child. Whenever it rained, she would always drag him out to play in it. But now she looked so terrified, as if it was going to eat her despite not being outside. As she continued to murmur words he couldn't make out, Neil didn't know what to do and stared at her. When another thunder rumbled from outside, she let out another scream and moved back as if to become one with the wall behind her. Attempting to offer her comfort, Neil reached out to hold Mia's hands, but she recoiled, pleading tearfully for him not to hurt her. "Don't hurt me, please. I won't say anything," she cried out while moving away from him. Seeing her broken expression, Neil suddenly felt a gripping uneasiness in his chest. Who could have caused her such anguish to elicit such a reaction from the rain? She resembled a frightened child, afraid of a monster ready to devour her. She was literally weeping, clasping her knees to her chest. Her typically carefree brown eyes were now filled with terror as they locked with his. And that expression, for unexplainable reasons, made him want to kill whoever it was that had hurt her and caused her to be traumatized by mere rain and thunder. Neil may not possess the expertise of a psychologist, but he understood the effects of trauma, as he had experienced it himself years ago. Despite years of therapy, he still struggled to function properly when confronted with triggers reminding him of his parents' death and the lives he failed to save 2 years ago. And in this moment, as he gazed at Mia, he sensed that there must be something significant that had led her to this state. Unable to watch her continue to cry, Neil reached out to assure her, "I won't hurt you, Harrison. I don't know what you're afraid of, but I'm not here to harm you." He attempted to calm her, but with another thunderclap, Mia screamed again, moving away from him. Horror and desperation filled her brown eyes as she begged, "Please, please don't hurt me. I won't tell anyone, I swear." Neil, not used to handling emotional situations, didn't know what to do again. She was afraid of his touch. In all his life, he had never had any situation where he had to console someone. He had lived an isolated life away from normal people who went to the military. He was the kind of person to handle things with his fists rather than his mouth. He hated it when people got emotional and cried. The sight of tears always made him want to hit someone to their senses so they could shut up. But witnessing this one before him cry like this, he didn't have such an urge or harbor the thought to shut her up with his fists. Instead, he made the bold decision to do something completely outrageous, something he would never have considered in his entire life. He started singing the song she enjoyed, the one his mother used to sing in her garden when watering her flowers. His voice wasn't as good as it had been when he was a young boy, but he continued to sing it when he noticed that she wasn't backing away anymore. Amidst the whispers of the midnight breeze, I search for a love that was never present. I have never experienced the warmth of its embrace, but in my dreams, I pursue an elusive beauty. Come to me, my... Neil felt ridiculous singing the song that was about longing for love. He had liked the song once, but hated it when he realized his mother sang that song because she never found love with her husband. However, he liked the song again when he heard it from Mia, but now singing it himself, he hated the sound of it from his mouth. Fortunately, he didn't have to continue singing it before Mia allowed him to touch her without retreating. As Neil held Mia's bare shoulders, he noticed the contrast between her cold skin and his warm body temperature. Seeing that she didn't move away, he picked her up and carried her toward his bed in a bridal style. She was still trembling and sobbing from her previous cries. In that moment, as he placed her on his bed, he didn't have any thoughts of hating someone being on his bed. None of those thoughts crossed his mind as he gently laid her down. However, as he tried to move away, thunder rumbled in the sky, causing her to tug at his shirt and scream. "Please don't leave, stay here." Seeing how her slender fingers were holding tightly to his shirt like she was holding on to her dear life, Neil reached out and uncurled her fingers from his shirt and held on to her hand instead. She was still wearing the towel around her body, and the injury on her forehead was still left untreated. Even though he would like to see to that eyesore of a wound on her forehead, she didn't seem like she would allow him to leave her side to go and get a first aid kit. He remained by her side, holding her hand, and didn't move to even sit down on the bed. Mia cried out when the thunder kept rumbling every second. Perhaps the haze of her trauma-induced state had caused her to forget who he was, but with the coming of another thunderclap, she cried once more, asking him to please hug her and make the thunder stop. Upon hearing her murmurs, a deep frown settled between his brows. "You are asking for too much, young woman. You have made me sing a ridiculous song and embarrassed myself. You will not make me sleep beside you nor hug you. The least I can do is hold your hand like I'm doing right now. Now close your eyes and think about happy thoughts instead of letting those rumbling sounds outside get to you," he advised nonchalantly. He had already gone out of his way by singing her that song. He wasn't going to lay down and hug her to sleep. And when he didn't do what she wanted, she cried even louder and held onto his hand so tightly that her nails dug into his skin. "You must be kidding me," he muttered in disbelief as he looked down at the childlike adult on his bed. Was she always like this when it rained, or was she just throwing a tantrum to get him to lie down with her? Neil would have believed the latter if he hadn't seen the horror in her eyes. If he had known that she reacted like this to Rain, he would have just taken her home when she refused to get into the elevator with him. But his pride had made him force her into the elevator, and now he was paying the price by having to do ridiculous things to comfort her through her trauma. The only time he ever laid in bed with a woman was when he was satisfying his own needs as a man, but even then he never used his own bed. He always went to hotels, and he never stayed in the bed with the nameless women afterwards. He would leave and wash off any lingering scent of them from his body. But now there was a woman on his bed pleading for him to lay beside her and hold her to sleep. The fuck he would. He wasn't going to move anywhere close to her. When Neil saw that she wasn't going to keep quiet until he'd done as she pleased, he sighed, reluctantly taking off his shoes and climbed onto the bed. Even before he laid down, she had moved closer to him, wrapped her arm around his midriff, and buried her head between his body and the bed. He stiffened as her arm tightened around him. Although he despised physical contact and anyone invading his personal space, he was still a man with a human body. He wouldn't have some traumatized little woman mess with his manly instincts in his own bed. Neil thought as he tried to push her away from him, but she clutched to him like glue and refused to let go. He could push her away from him if he added his strength, but then he could hurt her in the process. Thus he was left with one option, to simply lay down beside her until she fell asleep and he would get the heck away from her. With that thought, Neil patiently laid down, and she immediately moved even closer to him and hugged him tightly. He could perceive his body wash she used to bathe earlier on her body. She smelled like him whenever he came out of the shower. He couldn't help but also realize that her body was cool against his warmer body temperature. "You're going to regret making me do this, Harrison," he muttered softly as she nuzzled her head into the curve of his neck. Chapter 58. Waking up nestled against her chest. Mia stirred in her sleep, but when she tried to move, there was an unexpected weight on her chest, with something holding her firmly in place. She frowned even before she opened her eyes. Was her cat laying on her chest as usual? She thought to herself, but strangely, Robbie was heavy today. With her eyes still closed, she raised her hand and tried to gently push the cat off her chest, but then the cat on her chest wasn't moving away. What was wrong with Robbie this morning? She knew how the cat could be stubborn at times. He would sometimes even sleep on top of her head if he wanted to. But today, he had decided to sleep on her chest, but then as she attempted to move, an unyielding force resisted her every effort. Too lazy to open her eyes, she used her hands to trace the outline of the thing on her chest. She froze when she felt something like a person's head. Wait, this wasn't her cat. With panic, Mia finally forced her eyes open, greeted by the sight of an unfamiliar gray ceiling with glass walls that overlooked the night city. She froze as realization slowly began to dawn on her. She had left school with Mr. Bennett, and he brought her to his condo. She took a shower, he offered her a job. Then the last thing she remembered was seeing that it was going to rain and she had to go home. What happened next? Wait, she was still in his house and laying in a bed with something, or someone's, head on her chest. As she peered down, her widened eyes met the sight of a tousled, black-haired head resting on her bare chest. A gasp caught in her throat, and she cautiously observed the scene. The black towel she had worn after her shower was now disheveled and lay on the bed, leaving her exposed without any clothes. And his head was literally nestled against her bare breast while he seemed sound asleep. His strong arm encircled her waist, and one of his long legs intertwined with hers, while there wasn't a blanket in sight. Mia's panic escalated into a loud scream, breaking the serene atmosphere of the night. Without hesitation, she used all her strength to push away from him, causing him to tumble off the bed with a thud. She heard him curse as he hit the ground, but before he could get up, she had grabbed the towel and hastily wrapped it around her naked body. When Neil finally got off the floor, where he had been pushed off his own bed, he was met with a pillow hurtling towards his face. He dodged the pillow by moving to the side, but before he knew it, another pillow had been thrown and it hit him directly on the face this time. "You pervert! How dare you take advantage of me in my sleep? How could you have done this to me without my realization? I have reserved my virginity for the man I'd love and marry, but you took it away from me." Mia cried out while looking for something else to throw at him in the moment of her rage. She couldn't believe he had done this to her in her sleep when yesterday he had told her plain to her face that there was nothing interesting about her body. She had been hurt by the insult but was grateful that he wasn't interested in her in such a way. But now, Mia angrily picked up an ashtray on the nightstand and raised it up to throw at him, but her hand froze in midair as she met his murderous glare and darkened eyes. He stood beside the bed with his hands shoved into his pockets, but his expression was as cold and aloof as a ruthless monster ready to kill anything that moves. And when he spoke, his voice was calm but was devoid of any emotions. "Throw one more thing at me, and watch me make you scream your lungs out underneath me. I will make your accusation come true and show you what a pervert I am," he warned, his eyes locking onto hers in challenge. He hadn't meant to even fall asleep when she was clutching tightly to him for her dear life. He had meant to get off the bed after putting her to sleep, but he had unexpectedly fallen asleep along with her. Perhaps it was because of the rain, but he had never enjoyed his sleep like he did today, yet only to be awoken by a scream and a person pushing him off his own bed. Mia, who still held on to the ashtray in midair, slowly lowered it, hearing his threat and seeing the challenging look in his eyes. Recalling his words, she realized he hadn't done anything to her in her sleep, and not feeling any discomfort in her lower part, she believed nothing had happened. Her towel must have come off in her sleep. Furthermore, she realized it had rained, which meant her nightmare had been playing in her head like a reality. He must have helped her through it and even put her to bed, but she had accused him of rape. It was only natural that his ego as a man was hurt. Mia's cheeks reddened in embarrassment, and her face heated up as the image of his head resting on her bare breast flashed to her mind. If someone had walked in on them in such a position, there was no doubt the person would believe what she had also believed when she first woke up. It was such an intimate sexual position that indicated that something had happened between them. But she knew nothing had happened, and it was just a position they must have taken in their sleep. I'm sorry," she muttered softly while climbing down the bed and clutching tightly to the towel around her body. However, her apology did nothing to ease the murderous glare he was shooting her way from across the bed. "You seem to have the habit of always calling me a pervert, don't you? But let me warn you, little one, I am no saint, and the next time you call me that in my own house, I will prove to you how much of a pervert I can be when angered." Saying that, he stormed towards the bathroom, leaving Mia bewildered in the bedroom. "Yeah, right, Ice Cube," she murmured to herself while glaring at the closed bathroom door. Immediately, she heard the sound of a pouring shower and knew he was taking a shower. How many times did he shower in a day? Obviously, they were still in the same day from when he brought her to his house, and it was night. Mia panicked, realizing it was night already and she hadn't gone home. Her mother must be sickened with worry. Thinking about this, she rushed out of the bedroom and went to the living room where she dropped her bag with her phone in it. Bringing out the phone, she was met with 37 missed calls from both Owen and her mother, including Rain. Looking at the time, she also realized it was 11:55 p.m. She had come to his house at around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but now it was almost midnight. Her mother would probably be thinking the worst at this moment, as she hadn't returned home. Mia quickly decided to call her back and assure them that she was on her way home, but her phone just had to die at that moment. "Shoot, I forgot to bring my charger." She ran her fingers through her messy hair and threw the phone back into her bag. She decided to just go home and explain to her mother what had happened. But then she couldn't go home alone by this time of the night with just a towel. Recalling that Leo had lent her his clothes earlier in the day, Mia hurried back to his bedroom. She realized he was still in the bathroom. Hastily, she picked up the gray shirt and trousers and quickly put them on. Mia felt like she was dancing inside his clothes. The shirt, which was meant to be a regular fit, appeared baggy and oversized on her. As for the shorts, Mia couldn't help but chuckle at how ridiculous she looked. They were supposed to be shorts, but they reached below her knees. If it weren't for the strings on the trousers, they would have fallen off her hips. Despite the comical situation, Mia couldn't afford to laugh or think about anything else. She was grateful that he had even offered her his clothes, especially considering what a hygiene freak he was and didn't seem like someone to give people his things to wear. Before long, he emerged from the bathroom and went into his closet without acknowledging Mia's presence. She stood quietly on the side. He had offered to give her a ride home earlier in the day, so perhaps the offer still stood and he would take her home once he was ready. Unfortunately for Mia, when he emerged from the closet, he was wearing his nightwear. Neil, who had emerged from his closet and was ready to return to sleep, was surprised to find the girl standing nearby, resembling a frightened mouse as she wore his clothes. His clothes made her appear smaller and adorable. However, Remembering how her persistent childish behavior of clutching to him in her sleep had forced him into taking a cold shower in the middle of the night to calm himself, his expression darkened and he averted his gaze, pretending not to notice her. She could watch him sleep for all he cares, but at this moment, he didn't want to deal with her after what she had made him go through the whole day and night. Noticing that he intended to ignore her and go to sleep, Mia quickly stepped forward and looked up at him with a pitiful expression. "Can you please take me home? I want—" "No," he cut her off coldly, and prepared to walk past her, but she reached out and grabbed his arm. Feeling her cold fingers on his arm, Neil stiffened. He glanced down at her hand, and as if she had been burned, she quickly released him and said, "Please. If I don't go home now, my mom will be extremely worried. I don't want to be the reason for her increased blood pressure. Please," she pleaded softly, tears already welling up in her eyes. Looking into her tear-filled eyes, Neil closed his eyes and cursed under his breath. Why was he always unable to see her shed tears? "Let's go." Saying that, he walked to his nightstand and grabbed his car keys. This young woman was going to be the death of him before his mission was over in Ivy Grove. Chapter 59. Side with her childhood sweetheart. Mia was panicking the whole ride to Whispering Way. Her panic did not stem from being late in returning home, but rather from knowing how concerned her mother would be and the potential consequences of her worries. Her mother was still taking high blood pressure medications, and her doctor had advised her to avoid situations that would cause excessive worry. Until today, Mia had been successful in following this advice and avoiding causing any worries to her mother. If she hadn't gotten into trouble with Diane in school and hadn't followed Leo to his house, she wouldn't have been in such a situation in the middle of the night. Because of her anxiety, she did not even pay attention to Leo speeding through the streets of Zen City until his tires made a scraping sound as he sharply turned into Whispering Way Street. Mia's heart made a jump in her chest as the black Ferrari came to a sudden stop in front of their apartment building. She had intended to tell him to drop her off at the street junction to avoid raising gossip, but due to her distracted mind, she hadn't even realized he'd reached their apartment building. Whispering Way was a street that never slept. Despite the late hours, there were still people moving around and carrying on with their nightlife. However, the moment they noticed the black Ferrari, everyone stopped what they were doing and turned to look towards the car. They couldn't help but wonder who it was this time that came into their town in an expensive car. The last time was a limo, and now a Ferrari. It couldn't be Elizabeth's daughter again, who studied in an expensive school to show off to them how different they wanted to be from the rest. As Mia noticed the eyes on the car, she hesitated to open the door until Neil's questioning, cold gray eyes swept towards her. He arched a brow. "Why are you still sitting? Don't tell me you're expecting me to get down and open the car door for you. Get out," he deadpanned in a detached, calm tone. Mia laughed nervously as she met his eyes. "Can you perhaps drive back to the junction so I can drop there and walk back here?" she asked. Coming down here would only raise more gossip about her and questions about what she had been doing out the entire day to return home in the middle of the night in a man's car. It was best if she went back to the junction and walked back home than to climb down with all those eyes waiting to see who would climb down from the car. However, the man beside her in the car wasn't that considerate, or perhaps didn't seem to even care about her situation. He let out a humorless laughter that sent a slight nervous shiver down her spine. "Harrison, either you get the fuck out right now, or I turn back and drive you back to my place. I am not going to make any stops from here," he warned nonchalantly with his indifferent, aloof eyes regarding her like a predator giving its prey a chance to escape. Neil had abandoned his sleep to drive her home, but here she was asking him to take her back to the junction. Did she take him as her driver? She should even feel lucky that he had driven her twice in his car today. He wasn't a guy to drive people in his car, but he had done that for her. He had a lot of things to get done in the morning before he would head to Ivy Grove Institute, but here he was wasting his time with this young woman, who had done nothing but made his life hell the whole day today. He didn't know why she wanted to go back to the junction, but he didn't give a fuck. Mia pursed her lips at how arrogant he was. She hadn't asked for something impossible, but for him to just drive her back to the junction. Yet, he acted as if she had requested his entire car. Did all wealthy people behave this way, she wondered, as she grabbed her bag and decided to exit the vehicle before his annoyed stare turned deadly. As Mia opened the slid-up car door, she noticed Owen pacing outside the apartment building. She didn't need anyone to tell her that he was waiting for her, she already knew. Climbing out of the car, she immediately felt the weight of judging eyes upon her. It was the 20th century, for goodness sake. People should be free to do as they pleased. Yet, it seemed as if the people in Whispering Way were still stuck in the past. Before Mia could even close the car door, Owen spotted her and stormed towards her with an angry expression. He had been sick with worry when she hadn't picked any of their calls since afternoon. He had even looked for her friend's number in the phone book in her room and called only to be told that she had left school before their classes even ended. He had lied to her mother that Mia was with her friend when he'd noticed how worried Elizabeth looked, but then he had come out here to wait and see if she would return or if he would need to inform the police, only to see her coming out of an expensive car wearing a man's clothes. He didn't have to be told to know that it was a man who was in the car. And whoever that man was, he was going to make him regret ever knowing his Mia. Owen thought in rage as he walked towards the car. Instead of approaching Mia directly, he headed for the driver's side and flung open the door without caring who was inside. Everything happened so quickly. Before Mia could intervene, he yanked Neil out of the car by his collar. Neil, who had been caught off guard by a strange man who dared to pull him out of his own car, frowned in displeasure. He was not just an ordinary person. He had undergone rigorous training for years, in addition to his military experience, and only a few people in the country could surpass him in combat and armed tactics. Neil had earned his reputation as the infamous Neil Wayner by not just being the country's major general. Thus, his trained instincts kicked in the moment the other man lunged at him. With calculated ease, Neil deftly blocked Owen's punch, his movements precise and unhurried. A cold smirk played on his lips as he effortlessly countered, delivering a calculated blow that sent Owen staggering backward. Not waiting for him to find his balance, Neil charged at him again. He had been itching to really hit someone for the past few days, and this man just happened to cross boundaries when he had been minding his business in his car, waiting for the girl to step down. "You fucking messed with the wrong person, man," Neil gritted with an arrogant tone, gripping Owen's collar and landing another punch to his face. His gray eyes, usually indifferent, now held a glint of something darker as he relished asserting dominance. As Owen crumpled to the ground, Mia subconsciously rushed towards him. "Owen, are you all right?" she asked in concern upon noticing his bleeding nose. Neil's gaze briefly hardened at the mention of Owen's name, a flicker of realization crossing his face. So this was the childhood best friend that replaced him in her life? He thought with a strong dislike towards the other man. Though he hadn't seen Owen's face when he was in Mia's room that day, he had disliked him immediately. He noticed how annoyingly persistent he was. He was too protective for a friend, and his actions now did nothing to make Neil like him any better. Seeing how people were starting to gather around them and looking as if they would attack Neil for beating up one of their town folks, Mia frowned in worry. Owen was clearly the one to start the fight, but the town folks, who valued their class over rich people, wouldn't hesitate to join hands and beat up her professor. "Who the hell do you think you are for hitting him?" yelled one of the men in the crowd as he stepped forward. Just because he drove to their town in an expensive car didn't mean they wouldn't beat him up for beating someone from their town. If they knew who he really was, they wouldn't dare be asking him or even attempt to fight him. However, Neil wasn't going to lower himself and fight a bunch of drunken commoners. He had better things to do. He glanced at Mia and saw her holding Owen's arm while looking up at him. He looked away and decided to just leave. Besides, the girl he had gone through the trouble to drive home had picked a side with her childhood sweetheart. However, Owen wasn't satisfied yet. He was still boiling with rage from where he was thrown to the ground. He clenched his fingers around a stone on the ground in anger, and seeing that the man was about to turn away and get into his car, Owen was fueled by his rage. He grabbed the stone and hurled it at Neil's face, then stood up while jerking his arm away from Mia. Time seemed to freeze as the stone collided with Neil's forehead. His stoic expression wavered for a moment, a subtle flinch betraying the impact of the stone against his forehead. For a moment, Neil didn't move and stood rooted in his spot in disbelief. Blood trickled down his face, yet he didn't move. "How dare you touch Mia? Who do you think you are?" Owen asserted in rage. He had watched over Mia for years, but now some stupid, arrogant man had taken her before he could even claim his love for her. He wouldn't allow it. He wasn't blind not to recognize the gray-eyed man from that night when he bumped into him on the stairs. Which also meant he had come from Mia's room that day. What had they been doing in her room? The air thickened with tension as Neil slowly looked up, meeting Owen's determined blue eyes. The simmering anger in Neil's gaze slowly transformed into a burning rage as his fists tightened with a crunching sound. The onlookers held their breath, sensing the impending storm from the strange man as he glared at Owen murderously. They might not know who Neil was, but they knew danger when they saw one. And this man before them wasn't someone they would want to offend with that look in his eyes, not to mention the kind of car he drove. They had only meant to scare him away so he wouldn't end up beating one of their town folks, but it seemed Owen was stupid enough to throw a stone at him when the man was already willing to leave. Chapter 60. A completely different person. Mia, who stood by Owen's side, was too stunned to react. She hadn't expected Owen to be foolish enough to throw a stone at her professor. She could see the rising rage in his eyes. In the span of a few weeks she had known him, she knew he had a bad temperament, and she had also witnessed him beat up people. Mia already knew that Owen wasn't going to be spared for his stupid act today. But Owen was her childhood friend. Even though she didn't support the fact that he had thrown a stone at Mr. Ice Cube and had even injured him, she was even more afraid of his rage and what he could do to Owen due to that rage. Instinctively, the urge to protect her friend kicked in, and she moved to stand in front of Owen protectively, her gaze pleading as her eyes locked with Neil's. However, as if her action had further angered him rather than tried to ease his anger, Mr. Ice Cube's eyes darkened even more, his glare shifting from Owen down to Mia, who was standing in front of him. There seemed to be a flash of disbelief in his gray eyes. She knew Owen had started the fight, but she'd always perceived a frightening danger from Mr. Ice Cube. She had a feeling that if he were to retaliate, Owen would get so much more hurt than a wound to the head. She could see the bulging, angry veins throbbing on Mr. Ice Cube's forehead, and his silver eyes had darkened ominously. A pang of guilt slashed her chest seeing the still bleeding wound on his forehead, with the red trickle of blood that trailed down his flawless face. Knowing him coming here and getting hurt was her fault in the first place, Mia took a step towards him, meaning to apologize. "Mr. Bennett, I'm..." However, to Mia and everyone's surprise, Neil turned on his heels and jerked his car door open and got into it. Slamming his car door with a resounding sound, he started his vehicle and drove away in a lightning-fast speed, leaving the rising dust of his tires behind. Was that just it? Mia thought in astonishment as she watched the disappearing car in the distance. He didn't say or even try to beat up Owen before leaving. That was a big surprise to Mia, who had witnessed his volatile temper. She knew he didn't leave because she attempted to defend Owen. In fact, she'd been frightened herself by the danger in his eyes when she'd stepped forward. However, Owen wasn't surprised by the gray-eyed man's actions, because he believed he had triumphed and that Neil had left out of fear for what he could do to him in whispering way. Owen was still unsatisfied with the lack of retaliation, though. He had hoped for a more heated confrontation so he could cause further damage on the man to mark his own territory on Mia. Little did Owen know that he had chosen the wrong person to mess with, someone who would ultimately ruin his life in Zen. Furious, Owen angrily demanded, "What were you doing with that man, Mia?" He noticed that she was still wearing the man's clothes, and the thought of her being intimate with another man only fueled his rage so much so that he ignored the fact that she had even stood before him just now to defend him. Although he knew it wasn't appropriate to question her in public where others were watching closely, Owen couldn't suppress the overwhelming sense of betrayal that consumed him. The people who were gathered around them couldn't help but strain their ears to hear what was going on between the pair. Many elders in Whispering Way had watched them grow up together. When they were in their early teens, they used to be inseparable. Young men in the town had stayed away from Mia because of Owen, who had marked his territory on the girl. However, now it seemed the girl couldn't keep her legs close and went after a big fish, while betraying their poor Owen, who was most of the elders' favorite for his good manners. "I've always known that she would betray Owen. He has done nothing but take care of her, but look how she repaid him. Women are untrustworthy beings. That's why I don't trust my wife, who I suspect is sleeping with Ludo behind my back," remarked Mr. Dennis, who looked drunk among the crowds, while glaring daggers at his former best friend, Ludo. Mia, who watched the car disappear, was taken aback to hear Owen's question and the people's whispers of how she had betrayed Owen and slept with Neil. She swirled around furiously and landed a resounding slap on Owen's face. "You have no right to embarrass me like that, Owen." Saying that, she didn't wait to see his reaction or hear his reply. She turned on her heels and stormed into the building, but he followed on her heels. "Stop right there, Mia." He caught her arm before she could climb the stairs and swirled her around to face him. "How dare you slap me when you're the one in the wrong for sleeping with that man," he said through clenched teeth. His bloody face and darkened blue eyes made him appear like a completely different man to Mia, who winced in pain from how tightly he was gripping her arm. "Let go of me." Mia tried to wiggle her arm out of his grip, but he only tightened it and pulled her towards him. "You want me to let go of you, huh? Tell me, how much did he pay you to warm his bed, and I will give you double the price. You want to be a whore, right? Then be my whore," he taunted while giving her a dirty look. Mia froze in place at his words. She felt her heart sink into her chest as she looked up at the face of the man she had known since childhood. He was the closest person to her beside her mother, and the fact that he could accuse her of such a thing hurt more than she could imagine. At this moment, she realized she actually didn't know this man. He wasn't the Owen she once used to love as a brother. His eyes, his insulting words. Her eyes burned with tears as she tried to pull away from him, but his grip was too tight. He was hurting her, but he was too blinded by his unreasonable rage to notice or care. People were starting to gather up around the hallway of the stairs, but yet he wasn't letting go. His blue eyes looked savage with anger as if he would hit her. "You are crazy. Let go of me, Owen. I hate you," she cried out and began to hit him with her other hand. He could think whatever he wanted to, but she would never give him the privilege to control her life when she wasn't a child but an adult. And who was he to tell her what to do? "Let go of me, you're hurting my arm," she cried out while desperately trying to separate herself from him. Owen suddenly released her arm as he heard her words and saw the anguished tears in her eyes. He stepped back in disbelief as he realized what he had said a moment ago. He had called her a whore and insulted her. His blue eyes lost their savage glint and looked remorseful as he tried to approach her more gently. I'm sorry, don't." Mia cut him off through gritted teeth while stepping away from him. "Even think about touching me ever again. Today marks the day you will no longer have the right to have a say about what I do. I have no relation with you anymore, and stay away from me." Saying that, Mia turned around and left. On her way up, she came across Julie, who had a pleased smile plastered on her makeup-caked face. But Mia sidestepped her before the girl could say anything to her. As Mia arrived in their apartment room, she met her mother, who seemed to be waiting for her in the living room. "Oh, my child. What's wrong? Why are you crying?" Elizabeth jumped out of the couch upon noticing the tears in her daughter's eyes. She grabbed her shoulders with both her hands and searched Mia's face with a worried expression. "What happened? Owen said you were at Rain's place. Did something happen there?" Elizabeth had been worried sick in the afternoon when she couldn't get to Mia's phone. But Owen had assured her in the evening that Mia was with Rain, and because of the rain, she wouldn't be back home soon. Even though he had assured her, Elizabeth knew how her daughter reacted to Rain. Only she could comfort Mia whenever she fell into her traumatized state of mind. Even Owen had been unsuccessful in helping her overcome her fear of Rain in the past, and sometimes, she might even pass out if her mother wasn't there to be with her. Elizabeth had been concerned that Rain wouldn't be able to handle Mia. She had been unable to sleep, worrying that her daughter had passed out in her friend's place because there was no one to comfort her. But then it didn't seem like the case. However, something else had happened to make her daughter return home with tears in her eyes. "Tell me what's wrong," Elizabeth asked as she tenderly pulled her daughter into her arms and patted her back. Mia broke into more tears at the warmth of her mother's embrace. She cried as she recalled Owen's hurtful words. He had been like a loving, caring brother for all these years, but today he changed completely into a different person. He called her a whore and accused her of selling her body to her professor. Knowing how her mother also took Owen as her child, Mia decided not to tell her about what he had said and done. She composed herself and stopped crying. "Nothing happened, Mom. I just feel very sad for no reason," she murmured softly while hugging back her mother. "It's all right, darling. Sometimes our emotions don't follow a clear path. It's completely normal to feel sad without a specific reason," Elizabeth assured as she ran her hand up and down Mia's spine.